Hello everyone, welcome back to the series. In this third video, I'm going to show you how to set up a menu system as well as write the game's manager for Meteor Galaxy. So let's get right into it. So in front of me, I have some Java code, and the reason I have this is because I want to show you the concept about enumerations. Enumerations aren't directly supported in JavaScript, but there is a way of implementing your own enumerations. But I just wanted to show you this Java example so that you could see what they are. Right here, I'm gonna show you this concept by using something that we all know and love, and that's VHS players and VHS tapes. So who doesn't love the big old reel and the VHS tape? Just don't be that person who doesn't rewind after they watch it, because other people won't be happy with you when they want to watch their favorite VHS. All right. So right here you can see this enumeration is called state, and enumeration is kind of like your own variable type. So in JavaScript you have variables and they can hold strings or they can hold numbers, but and right here this is like another thing that the variable can hold. The variable can hold a state, and so that's the name of my enumeration. And state, I have a list of values that that state could be. So when you think about a VHS player, there's play, pause, rewind, fast forward, and eject. So this is really useful when you want to have specific values inside of a variable. So like different states like I'm doing here. And I'll show you this example that I wrote. When you run it, it initializes a variable called VHS player state and then assigns it state.pause, and then I just use these if statements to check what state it is and then print out different lines if it's paused or ejecting. So right now it's set to pause. If I change this to state.eject, you'll see it prints out ejecting VHS. So they're a really handy tool, and now I'll show you how you can implement these in JavaScript. All right, so over in JavaScript, since JavaScript doesn't natively support enumerations, what a lot of people have done online is use an object as an enumeration. So right here, you can see kind of like I set up the object map before, I set up one called state, and since the different keys inside of state need a value to differentiate them from each other, I just start with 0 and then added 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Then the next thing I want to show you is a switch statement. So switch statements are commonly used with states, and they're a lot like using a bunch of if-else statements, which I'll show you right here. So I have two methods. So one is print state if else, and the other is print state switch. And these print out the different states depending on the state assigned to VHS player state variable. So right here you can see it's kind of a lot of typing for the if else, if else, if else, if else, or if and then else if. And right here is the print state switch. So you can see the switch right here, you put in the variable that you're checking, and then there are different cases. So right here's the default case. Here's a case that's state.play, state.pause, state.rewind, and when the variable VHS player state equals play, it'll run this code right here, so it'll print play to the screen, then break, and then same with pause, rewind, and so on. The other thing I want to point out is if you don't have this break here, so if I were to comment that out, the code would just keep on running. So you need the break here so that it wouldn't go on and then do pause. So I'll show you these two things right here do the exact same thing. They're just two different ways of implementing those. So first I'll show you if I run this print state switch, we have this should be here. I'll go ahead and set this to play right now. So it prints out play, or if I do pause, it'll print out pause. So that works with the switch, and you can see the if statement will work too. So that prints out pause, and then you can also do play, and that will work as well. And the other thing too I showed you right here, since it keeps on, if you don't have a break, it'll keep going in the switch statement. So I have play 2 and play, and these will both run this code and then break out of this break right here, so out of the switch statement. And then the way you could implement this in an if statement is use an or. I'll go ahead and show you that with it here. So play 2. I'll uncomment both, so just run them at the same time. You can see both of them printed out play, since there's an or statement here, and here just continued on and ran the same code that play would run. Alright, so back to Meteor Galaxy, I'll show you how you can implement this in terms of the game. Right here we have this empty game manager function that I told you to get to, and now's the time we're gonna write that. First, let's set up an enumeration, or well, an object acting as an enumeration that'll hold all our states for the game. So I'll say variable state equals, and then open bracket, close bracket, semicolon. And then let's put in a few states to get started. So let's do init intro, and then have it be 0, and then play intro, and then have that be 1, and then menu, and have that be 2. So we've just created kind of 3 states for the game, and we'll add more later. We'll just use these to get started. So let's go back to the game manager, and I'm going to take out the test draw method for now, because that was just to test some methods from the last video. I'm going to uncomment the set timer and then get rid of test draw here. So this will now call a game manager again. So inside game manager, let's put a switch in here, and we'll set up here another variable called game state, and let's to get started, we'll set that to state dot init intro. So that will be the first thing we'll do, is with the menu, the things like the text and the button will kind of move onto the screen, and then wait for you to click the play button. All right. Now we can put game state as the variable we're checking in the switch statement, and we'll set up a new case for each of the different states. So state, I'll just type these out and fast forward. Alright, so now we've set up the very basics of Game Manager. It's basically just a switch statement, and inside of each of these cases we'll put the method to be called, or the function to be called, and then that way we can have a nice structure to our game and keep it all organized. Next, let's get into doing the menu system, and I'm gonna first show you how to do some smooth movement so that you can move the objects onto the screen nice and smoothly. So we're gonna write helper function right here, and this will be called move to. Give myself some space here. The next thing, we're set up the parameters. So we'll have the shape that we want to move, the x or target x, target y, and then I'm gonna show you a thing called an optional parameter. This will be called centered, and we're gonna have it by default be true. So the optional parameter right here, since I'm giving it a value, it means that when you call the move to function, you don't actually need to define this last parameter. So if you just leave it with 3 parameters, it will by default be true, but of course you can set that to false if you'd like. Before we write the method for the smooth distance, I'll show you the idea behind the technique. So let's say we have a rectangle and we wanted to move it a certain distance across the screen, so it'd end up right here. One way that we can move it is, say, move it like 10 pixels at a time. So it would be like right here, and then here, and then here, and here, and here, and here, until it finally gets to its target destination. You can see the distance it moved has stayed the same, so they'll just move along steadily and then just stop instantly. But let's say instead of doing that, we move it half of the remaining distance to the target. So currently, let's say the remaining, so this is at 0, and then the target X position is at 10. So the remaining distance is 10. So half of that would be at 5 right here. And then let's say we move it again another half. So then this would be at 7.5. So from here to here, it's moved 2.5. And then half of that, and then half of that, and then half of that. You can see that with every frame, it moves a little bit less distance. So from right here to here, it moved 5 pixels. Then from here to here, it moved 2.5, and then less, and then less, and then less. So what that would look like is, first we need to get the total distance remaining. So let's say when it's right here, from 0 to 10, we do the target X minus the current X. So 0 to 10, target is 10, current is 0. So that would be 10. But then if it's at 5, target is 10, current is 5. So it would be 5 remaining. And then we need to divide that by some number. So we could do 2, but if we wanted to have a bit more granularity of movement over on the left hand side, we could divide that by number like 10, and that's how we can create a smooth movement effect. So let's look at that in the code editor. Alright, so now let's write the method. I'm actually going to change the name to move towards, because it'll just move it one step closer to the target X and target Y. It won't move it all the way there, so I think that's a bit better name. Let's start with calculating the remaining distance. So first, we'll say variable distance X will equal the target X minus shape dot get X. So if you remember, that's how we did in the diagram. And then same for the distance Y. So target Y minus shape dot get Y. All right, so now that we have those, we can move the shape. So call shape.move, and we'll move it distance X divided by 10 and distance Y divided by 10, like that. So now we have a very basic setup, but there are a couple more things that we want to do, and that's taking care of the centered case. So that means if we want the point that we're moving it to, if we want that image to be centered on that point instead of having the top left corner on that point, this will be true. So we need to adjust the target X and target Y to compensate for that. So I'm going to put an if statement. So if it's going to be centered, then we'll do target X will subtract the half of the width of the shape. So shape.get width divided by 2. And then for target Y, subtract shape.get height divide by 2. So we got that. The next thing that we want to do is the method should return false if it hasn't yet made it to the destination, and true if it has. Because you're dividing the distance, it'll never actually get to the destination. It'll get closer and closer and closer, but there'll always be another place that you can divide it at. So we just want it to be close enough that we can set the position to the target X and return true. So to do that, I'm going to write another helper function, and this will be called getDistance. And we'll take in 2 points. So that'll be the X, the X1, Y1, and then x2, y2, so point 1 and point 2, and then the x and y position of those points. And then we're gonna find the distance on the x, so distance x will equal x1 minus x2, and then variable distance y will equal y1 minus y2. So that's the distance between points. Really, if you wanted to have it be the actual distance, you take the absolute value of this, but since we're going to be squaring it right away, we don't need to do that, because on the return statement we can return the square root, or math dot square root of so distance x times distance x, so the square of distance x, plus distance y times distance y. And because of order of operations, these will get multiplied and then these will get multiplied. So it's distance x squared plus distance y squared and then the square root of that. So it's just the Pythagorean theorem. So a squared plus b squared equals c squared. That will find the distance in the x direction and the distance in the y. And then what you'll get is the closest path between the x and the y, so that distance, which will be the hypotenuse of that triangle. All right, now that we have that, we can check if the object is close enough to the target. So we'll use the get distance method or function. So that for the first point, we'll get where the shape is. So shape dot get x, then shape dot get y. That'll be the first point, and then we want to see how close it is to the target, so it'll be target x and target y. So if that distance, we'll say, is less than 1.5, I found that was a good number that we could do, then we'll return true. And actually I need to move this above where we're checking, and then otherwise it'll return false. So it won't be able to get to this statement if it's already returned true. And one other thing I'm going to do is do shape dot set position, and then target x, target y. And what that's doing is, since it won't actually be at the desired point, this will just move it to that point in case it needs to be exactly where you put for the target x and target y, and then return true, of course. So right now we have the move towards method, and we can test this out quickly. Inside of the game manager, I'll just put a test function here. So test move, and write that function here. All right, so now I just wrote a test function here. It'll move a circle that's off the screen, right about here, to the center of the screen. And one thing I'll mention, since the circle, when you set its x and y position, it's actually centered, but with other objects it's in the top left corner. So, but because it's already centered for the circle, I put false in as on the optional parameter. So let's see. I realized I ran it once and I wasn't seeing the circle, because the circle defaults to black, and we also set the background to black, so it wasn't visible. So I just added this to red, and I also noticed that when I wrote this the first time, this was actually 1 and not 1.5. So 1 is the value that works well, but you can make this larger if you want it to not spend as much time slowing down. So you could just give a larger tolerance there. So let's go ahead and run this. You can see that it moves slow. Well, it moves quickly at first and then slowly to the center, so it has this nice smooth movement. And that's what we're going to use to move the title down to where it'll be on the menu, and then the play button up. So it'll kind of have a nice intro, since on your menu screen it's the first thing the players will see, so you want it to look nice and professional. Alright, so now let's write the game intro, and by intro I'm just calling, that's when the things move onto the screen, so I'll just refer to that as the intro. Let's take out the test move. You didn't need to write that, but if you did, you can take that out now. Take out this test move. And one thing I want to point out too, I'm going to be adding more graphics to this, and you definitely can use the URLs I'm using, so those will just use the graphics that I made, but you can also go to more right here and then click upload, and then upload a file, and it'll give you a URL that you can use yourself. So if you want to make your own graphics, that's awesome. You can go ahead and do that, and I do encourage you to make this your own, so have fun with it, be creative. And I'll put a file on the GitHub that has the sizes of the images, so if you want to make them a similar size, you can. That way it'll fit nicely in the game. But let's get started. So inside of this game manager, we're going to be calling the init intro and the play intro, and then when the intro finishes, it'll switch to menu. So I'm going to go ahead and write an init intro function, so function init intro, and go ahead and call it from the game manager, so init intro right here. So inside of here, we need to add the elements that we want onto the screen. The first thing I'm actually going to do is call remove all, and this is just good to make sure, in case things are drawn to the screen, to clear everything off, because now we're transitioning to the intro. Next, what I'm going to do is add the objects to the screen. There's actually one more object that we need to add. I'll grab it right here, and that is the play button. So I'll put this right here. So the new play button sprite right there, or object with it. So first, let's set the positions. So I'm going to use the set position centered method. And first, let's add the title. And I'm going to set that in, put that in the middle of the screen. And then I'm going to put it a little ways off the screen, so it'll come in. So I'll just say -100. And then now I'm going to add the play button. And then for placing it off the screen lower, we can do get height and then +100. So that'll put it 100 below the height of the canvas. Okay. Next, we're going to add these to the canvas. So add object map.title, and then add object map.playButton. So we're going to put those on the canvas. Since we got most of the intro initialized, we're going to switch the state to play intro, and this only needs to be run once. So we could just say game state equals state dot play intro. All right, so this will get run once, and then it'll move on to the play intro. Next, we can write the play intro function. And add that into the game manager. So in the play intro, we need to move the elements onto the canvas until they have arrived at the correct position. So on the move towards, that would be when it starts returning true. We know that that has moved onto the screen. So what we can do is call the move towards, and then use the two objects, so that'd be object map dot title, and then the target x will be the same, so get width divided by 2, and then let's say we'll put this 100 down right here. Move towards object map dot play button, and then we'll also do put in the center and put it 200 from the bottom. One thing I'd like to point out, it's good to use get width and get height when you're placing things on the screen, because if you resize the canvas, then it can scale to more sizes. So it's a good practice to have. The next thing that we need to do, since these return a variable, I'm going to make a new variable called finished and set that equal to true. And it'll be true until it has a reason not to be finished, and I'll show you what that looks like. So if we say finished equals move towards and then and finished, what this will do is move this down, and so if it's still moving, it'll be false, so this and statement will be false, so then finish will be false, and it knows that it needs to call it again. And I'll do the same for the other one, put and finished like that. And then if we're finished, so if both of the move towards methods return true, then game state can equal state dot menu. Okay, so let's run that and take a look. There, so those just moved in from the bottom. Actually, this should maybe 150, so just a little lower. There. There's one quick thing I want to show you. You notice I put the and finish after this method, and that's because of the way JavaScript evaluates if statements. If the first condition is false, it won't run the second. So in order for this to be, if you want to be certain that it's been run, you need to put the finish after this. But you could create a cool effect if you would like. So let's say we want to move the play button after this. We could put and finished, or finished and before, and then what this will do is it'll move the Meteor Galaxy first and play second, because while it's moving the Meteor Galaxy logo down, it will be false, but then once it's true, it's in position, and then it'll start moving that. So if you like that better, you can do it that way. And actually, I think it looks kind of cool. So I'll leave the finished before on here. The next thing I'm going to show you how to do is make the button clickable, which is pretty important, because a not clickable button, like, there isn't much point to that, is there? So I'm going to declare a couple of arrays that we're going to use. So first is going to be clickable objects, and just make an empty array, and then variable, let's see, click callback functions. All right. So if you haven't worked much with arrays, they're not too difficult to use. They're just basically a long list of variables. Well, they could be short or long, just depending on how much you fill it. And they have indexes. So if I were to do like clickable objects and then use square brackets to access something at 0, that would be accessing the first element in the array, and then I could call a method on it, like maybe set position or whatever you'd like. Or you could also change the value. So maybe I set the first one to 2, or set the second one, which would be 1 since it begins with 0 to 2. All right, so that's just a quick overview on arrays. Next, let's go down and write a few functions. I'll just put them right here. The first one, we're going to do a click handler. This will take in a parameter called e, and this function will get called whenever there's a click on the screen, and e will hold the x and the y position that the click was at. So now we need to add this as a callback method for the mouse click method. So I can just write mouse click method and then put in click handler. So that means whenever the mouse is clicked, it'll call click handler, which we're writing right here. And so the first thing we need to do is check if there is an object where that mouse click was, or specifically a clickable object where that is, and then call the callback method. So I'm going to use a for loop right here. So we're going to say variable I equals 0. I is going to be less than clickable objects dot length. So the length of that array, and then I plus plus. All right. Next, what we need to do is see if that click was inside of that object. So we're going to use a if statements I have here. So if clickable objects at the I index equal dot contains point e dot get x and then e dot get y. So this is the x and y position of the click. We're seeing if that click is within the bounds of that object. What we're going to do is get the click callback functions also at the same index and then call that. So this may look a little bit odd just having the 2 parentheses here, but you could think of it as just any other function. So if I have a function called set x, you'd have these after set x, and since this index is holding the function, putting these parentheses after it will call that function. Okay, and the next thing we can do is add a break right here. So since we found the clickable object at that position, we no longer need to keep going through the list since we've already found it, and it just wastes processing power. The next thing we're going to add is a function add clickable object. Since we're going to need to initialize the buttons by adding them as a clickable object. So this will have the shape, and then it'll have the callback function. And then we're going to just add these to the 2 arrays. So clickable objects and then dot push. So push just adds it to the array. We're going to add the shape, click, callback functions. Dot push, and then we're going to push the callback function. So we're going to add those to the array, and then the next thing that I'm going to add is a function called clear clickable objects. This one's going to be really simple. We're just going to say clickable objects equals an empty array. And then clickable callback functions also equals an empty array. So that'll just clear them all out. This is ideal for when you close the menu. You no longer want to be able to click the object that was at that index since you're no longer on that menu. Okay. The next thing we need to do is make the button that we added clickable. So we can use our add clickable object method, and we'll put this inside the init intro right here. So we have, let's see, we want the object map dot play button to be clickable. So for the callback function, we could just go ahead and define a function like any other ones, like init intro. This one might be play button callback function, could be a name, but that just adds more functions that we aren't going to need since it's only going to be used once. I'm going to use what's called an anonymous function. You can learn about them here on this Mozilla developer JavaScript page. So you can see right here, anonymous function is a function without a name. In this case, just to test, I'm gonna say a new function right here, and then just put some curly brackets, a few spaces, and then I'm just gonna do a print statement. So print line button pressed. All right. Let's run that and take a look. So we've got our play button and we click here, it says button pressed. We click out here, I'll make it a little bit more obvious. You see it's not clicking the button, but if we click right here, button pressed. So we know this code is working. That right now, I should have semicolon right here. Right now this is just the test, but later we can have it change the state to menu. But that's how you set up a basic input system or menu system. The nice thing about the way I've set it up is you can continue to add as many clickable objects as you like. For this game, there's really only going to be one button on each menu just to play it again. But I set it up this way so that you can use this same or similar system in your larger projects too. Just adding multiple buttons. So it's an expandable way of creating the menu system. One thing I'd like to mention is it's a really good idea to put comments in the code. You might not see me doing it that much when I'm explaining the videos, and I do that just to save time. But after the videos are finished, I add in the comments, so you might notice all of these comments appeared out of nowhere. If you're typing this out along with me, you can write in your own comments, so that might help you understand it better if you write in a way that makes sense to you. Of course, I'll add the comments and then upload it to the GitHub, so you can use my comments too if you'd like. All right, that brings us to the end of this video. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. So these past few videos have been a lot about setting up stuff to write the game, but now that we got most of that finished, we can start looking more into writing the gameplay in the next video. So that'll be exciting, and I hope you all come back for that. All right, have a great day. Goodbye.